Hi, everybody, and welcome to Conversations With. This episode, I'm joined by Detroit News sports writer Angelique Chengelis. She's been covering Michigan football for the Detroit News since 1992. She was named the Sports Writer of the Year in Michigan in 2018 by the National Sports Media Association. Angelique has been a fixture around Detroit sports for a lot of years, and she is as good at what she does as anybody in the business. She's a friend, and I'll tell you honestly, we're lucky to have her in our city working for our daily newspaper. She works hard, she's fair, she's honest, and she's really good. She's also a fascinating human interest story. Born in Ohio, she's pure Michigan now, and her range of activities and interests go well beyond her computer keyboard and sports writing. The angel of the big house, as we like to call her, is quite a lady, as you'll find out in my conversations with Angelique Chengelis. So why, Angelique, be a sports writer? You're a beautiful woman. You've got a degree from University of Cincinnati, and there you are out there writing sports, hanging out in locker rooms. Why? Where did that come from?
Well, I mean, I'm the youngest of four by a lot, and I had older brothers, two older brothers and an older sister. And she was really a great role model, Jim. I mean, she's 14 years older than I am, and became a doctor. And she was doing that before a lot of women were going into medicine. And then I had two brothers, and my oldest brother played football at Xavier. And actually, his coach was Cicchini, played Tom Cicchini, right?
He was a freshman coach of mine at Michigan at one point.
Is that right?
Yeah,
he was at Xavier, and I loved going to those football games. He dropped the program, but while he was, I think, going into his junior year. So I was around sports. I grew up playing them, and I grew up in a city that had the Big Red Machine. In my prime years, I'm 10, 11 years old, and you're watching the best team in baseball. And they're right in my backyard, and I went to a lot of baseball games, and I love the Bengals. I love Ken Anderson. And my next door neighbor, Eddie, and I were just, we were inseparable, and we both loved sports, and we came up with our own little sports club. And so it was always a big part of my life. And I finally realized that in college. I just started working at the paper and realized this is what fit for me.
The thing is that at one point you wanted to be an astronomer. You thought about that, and that seems to be kind of a direction. Because let's face it, I'm not trying to age you by any means, but back in the day when you got going in this business, it wasn't exactly a hotbed of women.
No, and I did love my astronomy when I was a little girl, and I would spend weekends just documenting going through books and drawing the constellations, and got a telescope. And I'm just not mathematically inclined, Jim. And the only thing I can do with math is like calculate a clothing sale and figure out what percentage off this is. That's probably all I can do. It was just, going into the field, I never thought about it. I never thought about being a woman breaking into this, predominantly male profession. And there were women before me, obviously, but I never thought about it, and it never seemed like something I had to think about. And to be honest, all these years later, Jim, sometimes there's people you have to answer to. You have to prove yourself a little bit more. But the people I've covered, the coaches, the players, no one's ever pointed that out, that, hey, you're a woman in this business. So I've never really had to deal with that.
So you really never came up and bumped into, quote unquote, the old boys club?
No, it was there. But, I wonder sometimes if it's because I had older brothers, that I kind of understood the way men in athletics speak to each other. And but I will tell you, I've never been, no one's ever treated me poorly. No one's ever made me feel like I don't belong. Sometimes I feel like I'm talking to some of these older coaches, and I'm thinking, do they know that I wasn't a coach? The way they talk to me is very familiar, like, oh, you were there, you covered this, this. And no, I don't recall ever, look, when I was an intern at the Detroit News after I graduated from the University of Cincinnati, and I had to go cover a lot of Tigers games, and I was sent to cover the opponent's locker room. And a couple times it was uncomfortable. And I will say this, to this day, I have never walked into a locker room and seen anything. I do some weird thing where I'm looking up all the time, and and I would go into those locker rooms and I'd ask the attendant to please tell me when so and so would come out. I wanted to speak to them. And a couple of times, I'd sit in the corner and wait. And a couple of times, the guys would be obnoxious and do stuff.
Uh-huh.
But for the most part, I mean, the Yankees were tremendous. And I think they were used to having women in the locker room even then. That's 1986. And they were great to deal with. There was the only real issue I ever had in my whole career was that year with the Toronto Blue Jays. And we're interviewing, there was a group of us around George Bell, and he just stops and he says, you've been looking around. And I'm like, no, I haven't looked at anything. And he just started giving me a hard time. And that was the only time I've been really disappointed in my colleagues too, Jim. I mean, and I know I was an intern, but by then they all knew me, and no one stood up for me until Jesse Barfield, his teammate, comes across from the locker room and says, no, man, she wasn't looking at anybody. She wasn't looking around. I watched her. And I'm just like, wow, okay, so that was nice.
So Jesse Barfield became one of your favorites, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. And the interesting thing is, a few weeks later, my sister, who was living in New York City, sent me a column from the New York Times. Ira Berkow wrote a very similar column with a similar situation with a woman in the locker room and George Bell being the aggressor and Jesse Barfield coming in and saying, chill out. Nothing was going on here. So, yeah, he became a favorite for sure.
I think, too, that based on what I read about you, that you grew up again with older siblings, and they made you tougher. I mean, they treated you pretty rough, I'm told, at least what I read, throwing the football at you, dropping things on you, shooting BB guns and stuff. You came out of that whole family situation, I think, as tough-minded and, quote unquote, willing to take a shot or let the criticism roll off you.
It's really true. I mean, I think I'm grateful that I had older siblings, and yeah, I mean, they used to call me the mistake and all that stuff, but because they're 7 years, 11 years, and 14 years older than I am. And my mother likes to tell this story, Jim, about we'd moved into this house, and she's at the kitchen window, and there was a big tree in the back, and I was a baby when we moved in there, and my siblings got a hold of a book that documented what your baby should be doing at 7 months or 8 months, and they wanted to accelerate my growth. So she's doing dishes or looking out the window, and she sees them hanging me by my hands on a branch. I mean, I'm little. I'm like maybe not even one yet, and they were developing my arm strength. That's what they told my mother. And having me.
Aren't kids wonderful? Aren't they the best? They got an idea. Brothers and sisters. I had 4 older brothers. I could tell you some stories that'll curl your hair.
I know. They're great. I mean, they wanted me. I had really long hair, and I loved Joe Namath then. And my brothers, it was before they let girls in punt, pass, and kick. And my brothers wanted me to be the first girl in punt, pass, and kick. And especially the oldest one, they would take me out, and my oldest one, Gregory, who played football at Xavier, he'd pick like the muddiest spots in the grass in the backyard, and he'd stand there and he'd just drop a football and make me dive into the mud pile to catch the ball before it hit the ground. And that somehow was developing me for punt, pass, and kick. I think it was just another way to torment me. But I loved it. I loved going out and throwing with them. And it's funny, a couple of years ago, Jim Harbaugh was having a Father's Day camp at Michigan, Jim, and a ball got loose. It was kids. Kids are working with the players, and Jordan Kovacs was there, and he was working with a group, and the ball came over to me while I was just walking over to watch what they were doing, and I threw it back to him, and Jordan's reaction was, all he said was, "You had brothers." So I'm like, okay, good. I can still throw, and I'm grateful for that. I really am. They never treated me like a princess, and they did when it was appropriate, but they never. They made me. It made me earn everything.
Well, and I think for what you chose to do, that was a great experience, and I think kind of laid the way so that you were able to navigate sports writing, sports broadcasting. Going into a man's world and coming out of it the other end just as strong as you went in. I think it was a great background for you. Let's get to the newspaper thing. You were an intern at the Detroit News, and then what was your first paying job in Knoxville? Is that right?
It was, and yeah, the internship at the News was supposed to be for 3 months, and it was going well, so they extended it for another 3 months, and they really wanted to keep me on them, but there were no openings, and I looked at a couple different positions, and I went to Knoxville, Tennessee, to the Knoxville Journal, and I'm really grateful for that. I think a lot of young people come out now and want to become, work for newspapers or whatever is out there now. They want to go to the biggest place. They want to be, they want to land at the New York Times, and that's a great goal.
Yeah, it's the same in broadcasting. Kids come out of school and they want to go right to ESPN or a network, and it doesn't work that way. You need to cut your teeth, I think, somewhere at the smaller places.
And you learn so much, and I learned so much from being in Knoxville, and it was different. I got down there, and everybody, it's a little more Southern, right? And here I am with this Greek name, and it was interesting initially, and then it was really good. And the funny thing is, I made more money as an intern at the Detroit News than I did in Knoxville. For 4 years. I made $400 a week, and it was just great. I covered Pat Summitt and the Tennessee women's basketball team. That was my beat. And then I covered. I would laugh because I covered the best teams there. I mean, they were national championship teams, and went to one of the first assignments I got was that they just won the national championship, and they went to the White House. So I went to the White House, one of my very early assignments there, to cover that trip. And I covered Carson Newman football, which was an NAIA champion at the time. And I did some Tennessee football. They would send me over to do some stuff, and it was really a great experience, Jim. I'm really, really glad I had. I learned how, I had to work on the desk. I'd have to work my day job, basically, my beat, and then I'd stay up, and because I couldn't sleep a few hours, and then go in and work a desk shift and copy edit it. And I learned how to lay out a paper. So you really do learn so much when you have that kind of experience, and I know you know that. And I wish people would be more patient. Young people coming out in this business or any business really, just be patient and cut your teeth for a few years at a place that's smaller, and it really gives you a great foundation, I think, going forward.
I agree 100%. I mean, I started in Saginaw and then went to Jackson, and I tell people the night that Richard Nixon resigned, I actually was on the 11 o'clock news doing the news, weather, and sports, and had to produce the entire show. And while you don't get paid anything in those jobs, I tell people I learned more there than I did when I got to Detroit. All the things I learned in Saginaw and Jackson are the things I brought with me to Detroit. And what I learned in Detroit wasn't the nuts and bolts as much as it was the nuances, but the foundation. The foundation was really laid at those small stations. While you were in Knoxville, though, did you have it in your mind, I'm going to get back to Detroit? I want to be back to Detroit. Or was Cincinnati a place you wanted to go? Because that's where you grew up.
No, I wanted to go to Detroit. And the funny thing is, when I had the internship in Detroit, suddenly the Cincinnati Enquirer called me, my hometown paper, and asked if I wanted to do an internship. And, I thought, well, I'm at home, maybe I should. And I really wanted to go to Detroit. And this is when mentors come in handy. And Tim Sullivan, who was the columnist at the Cincinnati Enquirer, has become a friend of mine and helped me when I was in college. And now he's in Louisville as a columnist. And I remember calling him, and he just was like, "Are you kidding me? This isn't even a choice. You're going to go to Detroit." And I loved Detroit. I loved my 6 months here. And they had me do everything. And again, as an intern, now they're very much more like, okay, you're going to have your days off and you're going to have your week off, whatever, as an intern. And I never had any time off, and I loved it. I mean, I was happy to be working all the time. And it was just, I went to the Lions. I did stuff. I covered everything. And it was just a tremendous experience, and I wanted to come back. I liked everything about it. And that back then, both papers were enormous. They were 15 cents and 10 cents a piece. We had huge copy desks. They were, just lots of layers of hands your stories went through a lot of people. So you learned a lot about why doesn't this sentence work? Or maybe you should have brought this quote in there. So there was a lot more teaching then too. Obviously there were so many cuts now where, you get bare bones now at staff, but on newspaper staffs. But I was actually headed to the Memphis Commercial Appeal. I loved Knoxville, but it was a little, I needed to move on after almost 4 years. And I had taken out a lease on an apartment. I was getting ready to move to Memphis, and I really wasn't that crazy about it, but I needed something different. And then my boss called in Detroit and said, "Hey, got an opening. You're going to like one of them, one beat, and you might not like the other one." And it was Michigan football and auto racing. And when I tell you that even in Knoxville, when we'd be on the copy desk, we would make so much fun of NASCAR. These are guys who lived in Tennessee, lived in NASCAR land. And
that's un-American, that's un-American in Tennessee's making fun of NASCAR guys, isn't it?
Oh, we were. We were like, we'd sit there and go, "Oh yeah, we got to get this Darrell Waltrip story." And here I was. I was like, "Okay, I'll cover NASCAR and IndyCar and Michigan football." So it was really. I mean, I'll tell you, when I had to call the sports editor in Memphis, they were furious, that I was about to go, and here so I always think about all these coaches who leave football teams because there's another place they want to go. And I know that upsets people, but sometimes you just have to do it. And I got blackballed in the Scripps Howard chain because of it.
Really?
So, yeah, but it was still the best move.
It's a better job. I don't know why somebody doesn't understand that Detroit News as opposed to Memphis. It's a better job.
It was a way better job. And I'm so glad that I finally, I'm like, okay, yeah, I know I made a commitment to this, but I got to do this. This is where I really want to be. I wanted to go back north too.
Yeah. So when did you become the angel of the big house?
Well, that's Mike Stone, our friend Stoney.
I was going to say, who gave you that name? Was it Mike Stone?
That was Mike Stoney. It was when Stoney and Wojo were on DFN, and I would go on there, and he came up with it. It was Jamel Hill was at the Free Press covering Michigan State, and they gave her a nickname, and then they gave me the Angel. That was all Stoney. That was not Wojo. That was Stoney. And I don't know what year that was, but it kind of stuck thanks to people like you, Jim.
Well, listen, I'm going to make you famous no matter what, because you're good at what you do. I've always said that. You are a pain in you know what, but you are also very good at what you do. That. Yeah,
I've heard you say that a few times.
Yeah.
Pain in the you know what.
But you're very, very good at what you do. And here's the other question. You have a wonderful relationship that you've developed over the years with Michigan, with their coaches. I want to go through some of this. How did you become, because you and Lloyd had this little wink, nod thing during press conferences at times. Lloyd was a good guy and was very fair, I think, to most of the media, and I think he enjoyed his sparring, as it were, with you.
Yeah, and I enjoyed it too. I mean, Gary Moeller was the first coach I covered, and really, he was so good to me. I mean, he was, I didn't know how he was going to receive me, and he was great. And I always appreciated Gary, and then there was Lloyd, and I knew him as a defensive coordinator, and he could be when he was defensive coordinator, I always thought he was trying to test me, Jim. I'd call him, and he'd call me back after midnight to see if I was awake, I think. Or then he'd call me sometimes at 5 in the morning, and at that time, I was getting up really early, so I'm like, "Yep, I'm always around, Lloyd. You can't get away from me. I'm going to answer your call if you call." But those first couple of years when he took over as head coach, we did not click. I mean, I would jokingly call him Paranoid Lloyd, and I just, I think he was trying to feel his way through the job, and wasn't always.
Yeah, the other thing I think that kind of made Lloyd a little bit different at those first couple of years was the way it happened and the way he got the job. I think he was kind of uncomfortable because Mo and he were dear friends, and that whole thing with Mo getting canned wasn't the best thing, but Lloyd had to do what Lloyd had to do, got the job, and I think those first couple of years he was trying to walk on eggshells. And it might have been that way with writers and someone like you, because I know later on you guys had a wonderful relationship.
We did, and I think there was a lot of respect there. I really, I always say this about Lloyd, Jim, and I think you know this too. I think he never if he didn't want to answer something, he would just say, I don't know, or I'm not going to answer this. He didn't make something up. He didn't fib. He didn't lead you down a path that, he's just telling you something because he wants you to hear something. So I think he never lied. I mean, I appreciated that. He was always very honest in his responses. And, I liked that on Mondays at those press conferences. And yeah, sometimes I'd just be a pest, and I just wanted to annoy him and keep him there as long as possible.
Sometimes
a lot.
Sometimes. Okay, just want to get that straight.
A lot, but it was like, okay, well, let's see how long I can keep him here. And I just kept asking stuff, and he would always answer. So I always appreciate that about him, and also that he would linger after press conferences. So if someone needed to talk to him one-on-one, he was available. And I know that there's this perception that he was gruff and tough to deal with, but I actually thought he was very fair, not just with me, but with the media. And I always found him, I always say he was authentic. Like the halftime interview when he barked at, I forget who it was, at the television halftime interview when he called it the dumbest question he's ever heard. I mean, there were times he'd show up at press conferences and he was angry at someone, and I love that he was raw. He'd come in and you could tell he was mad because he had a crumpled up piece of paper that he'd written what he wanted to say about whatever writer, and he'd pull it out and smooth it, and he'd kind of get mad and then move on. So it was a good relationship. It was fair. We were fair to each other.
Speaking of gruff and stuff with Lloyd, did you have a chance to get to know Bo a little bit? Because Bo was retired when you took over the Michigan beat, but I know that you had an opportunity on occasion to talk with him. What'd you think of the old man?
Oh, we talked a lot, Jim. I mean, honestly, before every football game, every home game, when I could, and it was often, I'd just go up there, up to
go to his booth.
Yeah, to his booth, his little private booth,
yeah.
And the two of us sometimes were the only ones in there, and we just chit chat. And I'd go into his office a lot, and I remember one time we had it set up that I was going to do a Q&A with him, and before we started, he took out this little bag and he put out a piece of a napkin and he spread it out, and he brought a scone for each of us to share, enjoy while we talked. And I had this, his storytelling, as was tremendous, and his insight. And I found something that I'd written. It might have been from that Q&A, things about the NCAA, things about the way the sport's going. That he was right. I mean, he really knew what was coming and had his finger on the pulse of college football. And I always appreciate that.
Yeah, his instincts were always like 100%.
His instincts were great. And I just, he would always joke when he'd see me, say, "Yeah, you're my favorite female sports writer," and he'd laugh. He goes, "You're the only one I know." And he'd laugh.
And he could, as I've told people, he could charm your socks off too. I mean, the public image he had, how could you like that guy? Because you see the pictures on the sideline, but when way back, ancient history, Robbie first met him. She didn't know. She only knew the public image. Within 30 seconds, she was enthralled. I mean, and it stayed that way the rest of his life. And like I said, he was a special guy. And you being as close to Michigan football, your take on Bo, I think, is an important part of what made you a good Michigan reporter too. You understood the history and his history.
Oh, he was. Yeah, I mean, he was really. He was just always so fun to talk to, and you knew what triggered him sometimes. And when Michigan was flirting with hiring Pitino, there was a lot of conversation. I know our reporter there, Jim Spatafor, was talking to Pitino, and was interested in coming to Michigan, but he wanted to get paid. He wanted to make a decent salary, and Lloyd never made that much really in the grand scheme of things. He was pretty on the low spectrum of salaries. And I remember when Spatafor said what Pitino wanted, I thought, I wonder what Bo would think of it. And I drove to Ann Arbor, and And lo and behold, I was going there to get Bo, and he's walking out of the building, and I rolled down my window, and we started talking, and I said, hey, Rick Pitino wants to make more than Lloyd makes, and he just got kind of angry there, and he said, you know what this place is made, what it's built on. And he said, the basketball coach at Michigan will never make more. Yep, that was it. But, I got you in trouble with Bo, right?
Of course you did, all the time.
Rose Bowl, right? The smoking cigars after a Rose Bowl.
Yeah. Well, we got kicked out of the bar. That was the national championship
they just
year.
The law.
Well, they changed the law. It was midnight. Deerdorf, Calderazzo, we're all in. And Bo's in there, and he wants a cigar. He and Alex Agassi at the DoubleTree in Pasadena. And you're the one that instigated the police showing up.
No, that's not true. That is so not true. It had already happened. And I called you and you filled me in. So, of course, I wrote about it.
Well,
of course, it was probably made it look like you.
It's a better story if it's a better story if I say you instigated. All I know is that when it came out afterwards, I got a call from Schembechler. What are you talking out of school yet? What's going on? You talked to her about that thing. What's going on? I'm going, Angelique, once again. I'm under the bus thanks to Angelique.
Yeah, I get around the accused of things like this. Like Lloyd, this whole story with Brian Griese coming back, when he was really mulling over what he should do. And then Lloyd says there's a story I wrote that I quote Brian saying he wanted assurances. And Lloyd's like, oh, yeah, I was going to give him assurances. I'm like, did I really write that? I don't even remember. But Lloyd,
well,
they remember what they want to remember, just like you.
Yeah, that's right. Well, okay. Lloyd and Bo and Mo, we talk about. Did you see Rich Rodriguez and Brady Hoke being the mistakes when they were hired?
No, I didn't know what to think. Rich Rodriguez was a hot name at the time.
Exactly. I thought that too. He was actually in line for the Alabama job.
You're right. No, that's absolutely true. I thought Les Miles would be the natural fit at the time, but no, I didn't think it was a wrong move. I think at the first press conference, I wasn't sure. I think we always base so much on that first press. Did he win the press conference? Did he win? And I don't think he didn't win or not win. I just was like, wait a minute, is he the right guy? And I wasn't sure.
And Angelique, and can I say something? If that's what you thought, then he wasn't the right guy. If you don't win that press conference, compare his to Jim Harbaugh's.
Yeah, right.
I mean there's the difference. And Brady Hoke too. Brady Hoke too. Brady won the press conference. The one line he said, "This is Michigan, for God's sake." With that one line, I think Brady won the press conference. And nobody wondered whether he was or was not the right guy. It was 2 or 3 years later when I thought Brady got into thin ice.
Well, that's true. And the thing with Rich, and I'll remember, I left Schembechler. It must have been that day. I know the press conference wasn't there, but I was at Schembechler parking lot, and I see Scott Loeffler, who's now the Bowling Green head coach, and he was leaning into my window. We were talking, and I said, with this offense, I'm just not sure at Michigan. And I said, this hire could set Michigan back 10 years. I mean, I remember saying that to him, and only because I wasn't sure that offense, that he'd be able to, that Rich would be able to get it going, and would it work in the Big Ten? I wasn't sure at the time. And I know that he says, if he had another year, things were turning, and maybe he was right. But I'm just not sure in the atmosphere that it was ever going to turn. And Brady, you're right. Brady came in, and I really thought Brady Hoke was going to be the right guy, and it was based on my experience with him when he was on the staff, on Lloyd's staff, 97. He's a guy who got Michigan, and at that time, Jim, I really thought that it had to be someone who got Michigan.
I agree.
And I always thought that, and that's because that's what I'd covered, Moeller and Lloyd, and people are like, well, they got to be able to go out of the Michigan family and hire somebody. Well, maybe, but my impression was, you need it. I mean, look at Ohio State. Ohio State fans will always say that about John Cooper. I mean, he had some great teams, but he didn't beat Michigan, and not often. And he was an outsider. And then they bring in a guy like Tressel, who's from Ohio, and Urban Meyer, and it makes those hires make sense. And but I thought Brady would be the right guy, but I think he was, I think he was in over his head ultimately, and I think he never you can be loyal to a fault, I think, as a head coach with who you hire, and I think that he could have done a better job surrounding himself with better coaches.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
Yeah. The other thing is that you just mentioned it, Ohio State and Michigan. That rivalry obviously is huge. You grew up with it because you're from Cincinnati, but that rivalry has a little special meaning to you because that's where you and your dad kind of connected, right?
It is. Yeah, no, it really is. I mean, my father was a kicker. He grew up in Dayton, Ohio. Both of my parents are children of immigrants from Greece, and he had they called him Golden Toes, and he was good. I mean, he went to Ohio State for a year, and after the war, but he had been so broken up, his back had been broken that ultimately they decided that physically it wasn't a good idea to keep him on the roster, even as a kicker. But so. We loved Ohio State. I mean, everything I remember, I mean, those Rose Bowl days, January 1, I mean, the parties we had and the scarlet and gray and the Buckeyes, the necklace that he gave me, I cherish that. And, yeah, I mean, it was a way for us to connect.
Right. As a reporter, though, too, you were well ingrained with what that whole rivalry meant. Did you find yourself covering that game when you first came as you got to be impartial. You're kind of a writer, but you wanted to work for the Detroit News. You're kind of a Michigan native in a way. Did you find your loyalties kind of mixing when you first got the Michigan beat to cover that football game?
No, I really don't. I mean, I think that's one thing, you learned, and I learned it pretty early, and it's unfortunate too, because, everyone grows up sports fans, and even reporters who are unbiased, they were sports fans, and I am a fan of sports. I'm a fan of competition, but it does suck the fandom out of you. So I think that I lost that early on, and the only sport I still think I can root for is Roger Federer and watching tennis. And
I was gonna get to tennis. You're a big tennis junkie, and Federer is your pedestal. He is the Mount Rushmore of Angelique Chengelis tennis, isn't he? Is Nadal up there with him? Who's the other one?
I like Nadal. Yeah, no, I like Nadal. But McEnroe was my guy growing up.
Was he?
McEnroe.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, I love the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry from the time I was a little girl. And I think that's what I love. I love the rivalry.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter to me. It's, the teams, I just I don't have a rooting interest, but and I know I wrote about this a couple of years ago, and I thank you and Dan, and even before that, Frank Beckman. I mean, I would go up right before the Ohio State Michigan game, Michigan Ohio State game, however we want to call it, and just to watch the Script Ohio and watch the Dot of the Eye and seeing it from your booth, which you guys have always let me come in there, and you've got the windows open, and I can hear the crowd and I can see the band, and just that moment takes me back to my father.
There is, and there's no more adrenaline rush. I mean, it brings back memories of me back in 1969 as a kid, when we won that football game and beat Ohio State in a great upset. But it brings back that memory of you and your dad and the relationship you had because it was based a little bit around that game. And the adrenaline rush, there's nothing like that game.
There isn't, and I laugh at myself. I'm like, okay, Angelique, how much longer are you gonna keep covering this? And it comes back to that game, and I don't care which way the rivalry's going. And it's not a rivalry. We've seen these cycles before, and I mean, look, Cooper was 2-10-1 against Michigan, and now it's obviously the situation is Michigan hasn't been dominant in this rivalry in terms of wins, but the games have been competitive for the most part. Not all of them, but most of them. And it just, to me, this is sports to me, is Michigan, Ohio State. And I know people around the country will argue different rivalries, but to me, this is it. And I'll always love it. And it'll always be the center of my sports universe.
I'm in your camp on that one. All right. I'm going to head this. You mentioned some, coaches. We talked about that. I want to talk about your favorites in a little bit, kind of as a lightning round of it. Yeah, you get favorite players that that you covered over the years that you had you were able to talk to them and they were good interviews and they weren't just up at the podium talking, that you got to know them and their family.
Yeah.
Any players? Who are your favorite players over the years?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's any secret, Mike Hart. I mean, Mike and I are very close now, and that I'm lucky that the guys that I covered, even those first teams like a Chris Hutchinson, he was on the first team I covered in 1992. I mean, he's just a few years younger than I am, and someone I've known all these years and have talked to quite a bit more recently with the pandemic and his experience on the front lines at Beaumont. I mean, I go way back. I mean, talking to those, Doug Skeen and John Runyon back then, it's fun to see them now, all these years later, and just even guys you haven't seen in a while. A couple of years ago, it was in 2018. I remember it was Wisconsin game day, and I hadn't seen Chris Stapleton, the punter, in years. And he's walking with a group of guys, and he yells my name, and so it's it's great to be able to visit with those people that you covered early on, but people like Drew Henson and Mike Hart, I've been very close with, and I always found Drew to be a great interview then. But Mike, Mike, we laugh about the first. I think the moment that we kind of knew we were going to be friends is his freshman year. It was at the Rose Bowl, and I was supposed to have an interview with him, and Dave Abloff he told me, yeah, we'll be here at noon. And I'm waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting for this freshman running back. And he finally shows up. And he just sort of has this I'm here. And I just finally looked at him and I said, you know what? I'm not interested anymore. And I just walked off. And I'm just like, you can't make me wait this long for an interview. You're not that important to me. And he just started laughing and I started laughing. And I didn't come back and interview him. And it was like that moment we're like, okay, we get each other. And, but we talk quite a bit. And so he was always a favorite. And, just more recently, Jack Miller, who, he was on some tough, there's a lot of losses, and he always came out and always talked to us and was always very forthcoming. And he was really good. And, Marcus Ray back in the day, I mean, he was, who talked more than Marcus and talked really well about everybody. Just about him. He talked about how everybody plays, and he was fun to talk to. And there's so many of them, Jim. I mean, them.
Oh, I know. I just kind of wanted to get. Is Brian Greasy one of your favorites? Is the budding romance?
You know what?
I had to do it. I'm sorry, but I had to do it.
It's faux romance. I mean, honest to God, Brian and I not get along the first couple of years. We just did not. It was after he had his issue, his off the field issue, that I think he grew up. And the moment the Brian Greasy and I thought we had we kind of moved past whatever it was that we just didn't have. We weren't getting along. Was I had a phone interview with him set up, and it was right after Princess Diana was killed in that car accident. And I knew that Brian's mother had passed away when he was young, like about 12. And, I'm watching these, young boys who just lost their mother. And, Brian and I started talking on the phone, and I said, I don't know if this is comfortable for you, but I said, I was just thinking of you, as a young boy losing your mother. And he got really emotional, and he was really thoughtful and really shared about how difficult it was. He was the last one at home with his dad, and how his dad would get up and try to make breakfast for him like his mother did, so they keep some kind of normalcy there for him. And it was really we really bonded over that. And after that, it was I really had a different respect for him, and I think that he knew I wasn't out to get him or whatever it was he was thinking. Who knows? Yeah, no, it was good. And people always say, "Oh, did you covered Tom Brady?" And I just I think the only time there were a couple times interacting with Tom Brady at Michigan, and I remember sitting with him in the Commons area, and he had a old golf hat from Paiute, which was a place in Vegas where I had golfed, and he liked golfing, and we talked. But he was always so serious, and So he was a different guy, I thought, to cover. But he was good. I
Yeah.
mean, I always thought he was such a great fourth quarter guy.
Yeah. Did you ever think he would be what he is?
No, I didn't. And I don't know that anybody could have thought that. But
I told people, I was doing Lions games at the time, and I told people, I said, he can play in the National Football League.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's no question he can play in the National Football League. But I had no idea that he was going to be Tom Brady, that guy.
Yeah.
And I think that's where everybody is. I just, when he played that Alabama game in the final game of in 2000,
mm-hmm.
At the millennium, that January 1, 2000, he was as good as any quarterback I've seen throwing the football. He was. And
when you ask about players too, the quarterback. You talk to the quarterback more than anything. And I'm not saying this because I am talking to you, but I developed a great relationship with Shea Patterson. I'm going through that whole transfer thing, covering that story, and really developed a great respect for him and everything. He became sort of the face of transfers.
Yeah.
In this era, but I will say, I have always gravitated toward the offensive lineman, and I think that, and I say this to a lot of players. I think they're the smartest guys. I think that they are. I like they sort of play as a community. You can't play that position solo. You've got to be 5 guys working together, and they're so selfless. And I've always appreciated that about them. And I've talked to Thomas Gwines recently about that because he's now in the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Department.
Yeah.
And we talk about how playing offensive line helped him get into that profession. And talking to guys like that, and you, and John Jansen and Rod Payne. I mean, gosh,
I think
way back. They're the best guys.
Yeah, they are. I agree with you because I'm one of them. But I tell you the other thing. I think offensive linemen are great observers.
Yeah.
We watch what's going on around us, and I get better insight into the entire team dynamic because, we operate 5 as 1, but you also observe and see what everybody else is doing because you want everyone to be successful. And I think being that observer gives you, I think, a real perspective. And I think most of the guys in the offensive line are able to talk about it. They're pretty good from a standpoint of being able to express their thoughts through language, at least in my opinion.
That's right. I mean, Graham Glasgow was terrific. And he always had just an interesting spin on things. And you're right, because I think he was such a good observer. That's why Jack Miller was, even in those difficult times after a lot of losses, I mean, he could come in and offer some great perspective. And I think you get a real good read of the locker room from an offensive lineman, too. And I'm not saying defensive players can't deliver on that as well. But offensive linemen are very astute. And I was even talking about it with Joe Tate, who's a state representative who's pushing this NIL bill in Michigan. I mean, he was a 3-year starter at Michigan State. He was a captain in 2003, I believe. And we were talking about offensive line and why the linemen are just always, they're just. I don't want to keep piling on here. I don't want you to think that I'm just talking about you, Jim.
You're not. No, you're talking about a group of guys, like you said, we're selfless. It's all of us. So you're not talking about me or anybody like that. How about
no? But let's talk about Dan Dierdorf.
Well, no, let's not talk about Dan Dierdorf. Is my partner in crime, as it were. We just want to make sure we stay away from you as much as possible because we know whatever we say will somehow get out and it'll come back to haunt us.
Yeah, I know. It is pretty dangerous, isn't it?
It is dangerous.
I do bring you baklava to apply this information from you. My mom.
Well, I'm gonna get to that in a little bit. Last question in regards to football, because I'm gonna do another lightning round with your personal thing, your great relationship with your mom, your cooking, your concerts, but assistant coaches, guys that have come through down the road. You're not just players and a head coach. You know the assistant guys too, and. I've talked to them. One that's currently on the stage. I love Don Brown. I think he's a dinosaur, a throwback to the old time coach. I think Bo Schembechler, for instance, would have loved Don Brown.
Yeah, for sure. No, Don's great. I mean, I'm happy to see Mike DeBoer back as an analyst. I always liked Mike. I always liked giving him a hard time. He's easy. He's easy to mess with, and I mean that in the best way. but over the years, I mean, Fred Jackson he started on the staff the same time I started covering Michigan football. So I always sort of related to Fred and Billy Harris on that first team I covered. Those were great guys to deal with, and Bobby Morrison. But more recently, yeah, I mean, I think Ed Warner is a really talking again about the offensive line. I think, wow, what a guy, what a coach, and what a difference he's made. I think he's really interesting to talk to. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago, all the players kept saying, yeah, he's really simplified everything. He makes it better, and no one ever really said, well, how's it simplified? So I finally asked Ed one day at a press conference. I said, what do you mean by simplified? And he went on for like 10 minutes about it. It was so interesting, and he was so thorough. So I appreciate that about him. And but I think Jay Harbaugh is a really thoughtful guy.
Yep.
And there's a lot of young guys on this staff now, but he's the youngest, and he brings. I thought he brought in a lot of really good ideas for recruiting. But yeah, no, I mean, and I think Josh Gaddis, from talking to a lot of different people now more recently, they think he's a really gifted mind, and will go far in the sport in coaching. So there's a lot of, but Don Brown is he's hilarious.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the videos that I've taken from practices, I can't delete because they're so funny. And he's just how can you not admire his enthusiasm?
You can't. That's why I love him so, because you could just tell he drinks it. It's in his blood. I just love his passion and his commitment to the game and the kids that he coaches. I just think that he's that old throwback. Okay, I'm going to move on now. I'm going to kind of get into you. Your musical tastes are eclectic. You go to your first concert, right, is Billy Joel, but then you go to the Three Tenors and you love them. Now you're getting into Kenny Chesney and some of that stuff. U2. Where did that come? Where you're all over the map with those kind of musical tastes.
Yes, I am, Jim. One thing also about being the youngest of four is that you're alone a lot too. So I finally got a turntable, and I started listening to a lot of music. I started listening to a lot of music when I was a kid, again with older siblings, listened to Janis Joplin in the car, Cat Stevens. We had 8 tracks. We did a lot of car trips. So I listened to, my musical tastes go back, really to the 70s, early 70s, late 60s because of them. And I will tell you one funny thing is I remember I was probably 6 or 7, and I'm in the car with Mom, and the Doors' "Come On Baby, Light My Fire" comes on, and I just remember telling her,
Jim Morrison, yeah.
I said, Mom, I really like this song. And then she didn't look at me. She goes, no, you don't. So I'm like, oh, okay. I guess there's some songs I probably shouldn't say I like. But my sister went to the Beatles concert when they came to Cincinnati Gardens in 1964. My father was in the grocery business, and someone gave them tickets to him to give to people, clients, whatever. And they went, she went, and she said, all she remembers is them screaming. But I remember learning about the Beatles from them. But, as I got older and I was the only one there, music, sometimes you retreat into music, and it's what makes you happy. And I just listened to a lot. And my mom was, in Cincinnati, they had the Fine Arts Fund, and she was very active in that. So I started going to symphony and ballet and opera when I was a little kid, and I really loved it. And I really love opera. And sometimes storylines are over the top, but the singing and seeing Pavarotti, and I love that stuff. And now I'm trying to appreciate country music a little bit more. And I think Kenny Chesney's a great songwriter. And but I've got my go-tos. I like my Green Day. I like U2. I like the Police and Sting. So I always have those. But I like a lot of music.
My ringtone, speaking of country, my ringtone on my phone is Zach Brown's "Sick 'Em on a Chicken." Okay, the next question. What's your thing with grocery stores?
Yeah, my father was in the grocery business, and I worked at the grocery store. I am a superb bagger. When I go to the grocery store before the pandemic, when you could still I always like.
So if the newspaper ever goes down, you're going to be at Kroger bagging groceries.
I am. Are you kidding me? And I'll come home now, because now it's like the stores have hired all these young kids right now, because they don't let you touch the bags right now. And and I'm just like, I get really critical of the bagging, and it goes back to that. Like, I learned how to
Grocery
bag,
bagger
and I'm
Nazi
still
is
good
what
at
you
it.
are. I can see the Seinfeld show. You're a grocery bagger Nazi.
I am. I'm like, man, I guess it's come home. I'm like, God, Mom, he put this one thing in his bag. This is just so not right. But it makes me, again, it takes me back someplace that I'm familiar. And when I travel, I like to go to grocery stores. And because I think you learn a lot about the area too. Like, they'll have a section, like, made in Michigan. So you go to different cities and see what they're known for.
So you go 3-4 times a week, do you?
I do. Before the pandemic, I was going. I mean, that's what. I mean, the pandemic has been tough for a lot of people for a lot of reasons, and so this is a minor thing, but it was really hard not to go. I mean, I was going once every 7 or 8 days, and I'd be gone for a while, and I'd come back, and my mom's like, wow, you're gone for a while, and I'd just say, oh, the lines are, and I just was like wandering around. It's like seeing everything.
It's like withdrawal. You're going through withdrawal.
It was, and now I'm going a little bit more often, but still not very, and Nino Salvaggio is my go-to, the market here, and I just love being there, and I like seeing all the different food. It's not buying everything.
And I bet you stroll. You don't go shopping. You just stroll through and kind of look, don't you?
I'm not, like regular shopping. I do not enjoy shopping in general. Just like the grocery store. I mean, and I know if I want something, I'm going to get it, and I'm leaving, and I'm not going to go. Oh, I might be able to get it $2 cheaper at this store. Maybe I'll go check. I'm not. If I see it and I like it, I'll buy it.
Yeah.
But grocery shopping, I will spend time there.
Okay, here's the other question. You're a big junkie for romantic movies, but no Hallmark? What's that?
Yeah.
I mean,
look.
How
Jim.
can you be? That's like you can't be not romantic and not like Hallmark. I could write those Hallmark movies.
They're so bad.
I know. I mean,
with my mom's here, we have to watch them all the time. And I'll be like, Mom, we watched this one already. No, I don't think so. Yes, we watched it. I can tell you what's going to happen. And we watched it like 3 or 4 times. And,
here's my little game. Before the ending credits, we have a bet how many minutes or whatever the time is before the ending credits does the kiss come.
Right.
And it's 30 seconds, sometimes it's like a couple of minutes, but it's like, when will the plane land? We always had to do that on Hallmark movies. And yet you love old romantic movies. Like You Got Mail and Sleepless in Seattle. What's with that?
I'll go back to Philadelphia Story. I mean, Katharine Hepburn and
what about
Cary Grant?
An Affair to Remember?
Oh gosh. I mean, my goodness. Cary Grant, but the dialogue was better. And, there is something, you don't have to see people mauling each other in bed in some of those scenes, and I'm not trying to be a prude, but sometimes there's just something more evocative from just Cary Grant and Deborah Carr kissing. I mean, oh my God, Jim, that's the best. And then, more recently, like You've Got Mail and Serendipity, and a friend of mine turned me on to Serendipity, and I thought, that's a good one.
We just watched, Robbie and I just watched one, and I really love. It's called Leap Year. Amy Adams. Have you ever seen it?
Oh, yeah, that is good.
That's a real fun movie.
Yeah, it's fun, but the Hallmark movies are so basic, and the acting is usually so. Yeah, I'll take Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan any day over any. I don't mean to be that critical. Some of them are. My mom likes them, but there was one night not that long ago, and she's just like, I'm going through the guide. She's like, I haven't seen that one. And I said, you're not going to. I'm not stopping on it. I'm just not. Yeah, I know it was mean.
You have a great relationship with your mom, too, and you guys travel a lot. Where are your favorite travel places you take your mom?
We have. We've since I was little. I mean, we went to Greece several times when I was younger, and she would take all the cousins. I mean, none of her siblings did all that. She did it. She's kind of like the Pied Piper and taking people to Greece. And one trip before I was really able to go, they went to a lot of different places. But I always remind her she abandoned me for 2.5 months at her sister's place in Newark. And it was Newark, Ohio. Just the name of it has to tell you what kind of place it was. And but yeah, more recently, I mean, my sister and my mother and I were big Downton Abbey fans. And we took a trip to England, and and we did the tour at Highclere Castle where they filmed it, and we were there a good 10, 11 days. And Jim, she can't walk that well. I mean, she can walk a little bit, so it was a wheelchair thing. And I was just watching to see how long this was going to take. My sister's like, "Oh, I'll push the wheelchair," and that lasted about 10 minutes. So I think the rest of the trip, I did all the pushing. It was like, and we were walking like 9 miles a day.
Wow.
And I decided, I came back, and I think I lost like 9 pounds on just doing it because I was so tired by the end of the day. I wasn't hungry, and I thought this would be the greatest workout thing, kind of like the offensive lineman sled.
Yeah.
You put that and have that in front of a treadmill, and you can adjust the resistance, and you're pushing against something while you're walking. Because it was a great workout, but that wasn't what my big takeaway for the trip. It was just we've gone to London a few times, and we went to Dublin a couple summers ago, and quick trips. And we did one trip where we went to Prague and Budapest, and those were tough. Those are still, there's some, at least London, everything's smooth. There's no transition in the sidewalk. So that was easy to do with a wheelchair. But I think maybe I'll do a book on what are the best wheelchair accessible cities in Europe.
You ought to do it.
We've learned a lot.
The other thing you do is you cook a lot, and your mother is a great cook. What are your favorite Greek dishes? Is it desserts like the baklava, or are you a pasticcio moussaka proponent?
Yeah, I mean, I like to make baklava, but if I have one piece a year, that's good. And I know she makes a very good one, and I brought some to you and Dan, probably mostly to Dan. I don't really try to give you very
I know,
much
and I'm not supposed to eat that stuff anyway. But I do.
But I do like pasticcio. I do. I don't like moussaka. I call it moussaka. I don't like eggplant, but I like pasticcio. And my mother, it's Greek meatballs. They're called keftedes.
Yes. You know what small small Greek meatballs are? Keftedakia.
Keftedakia, gosh, you're good.
I learned from Jimmy. I learned from Jimmy Boutsakaris.
That's right. Yeah, those were really good.
Bizelia are peas. Paidakia, I think, are lamb chops. I know them all, man. I know a lot of food. I can order food and swear at you in Greek really well.
Great. And I'm waiting to be sweared at. I'm sure you will.
Oh no, I won't do that. I'm told some of the stuff Jimmy told me was not nice. So I don't use that stuff. I don't use that stuff. But boy, I love Greek food too. I do love Greek food.
It is good. But I never liked it. I mean, until more recently. I just the first time I went to Greece when I was like 7 or 8. I really didn't eat. My mother packed Chef Boyardee, like SpaghettiO cans in her suitcase.
You're kidding me.
I'm not kidding you. It's
that's
little
just
packs of Lipton cup of soup because she knew I wasn't going to eat.
That's just awful. Chef Boyardee?
So she'd have to ask the restaurant could they heat that up for me.
Oh.
Yeah.
No wonder you are the way you are.
I know. I'm really bad. That was bad.
You are really bad. I will tell you that. But you are a great interview, and I thank you so much for being on Conversations With. Really, this has been fun. I knew you'd be fun. I knew you'd be good. But I didn't know we would have this much fun over this period of time, and I really appreciate you joining us.
Well, maybe Dan Dierdorf will do some of these, and we'll have way more fun.
Well, I'm going to do him too. I did him on a podcast, but it was only like 15 minutes I had. I want to do.
I remember that one.
Yeah, I want to do about 45 with him. Go over his old coaches and old players, and what was Conrad Dobler really like? Those kinds of things. I think that'll be fun.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think those will be fun. But I would never put.
I appreciate you.
I know, Angelique. I would never put you and Dan and me on microphones all at the same time. I would not stand a chance.
You would never survive that.
I would be literally a broken man.
Which really makes me think, maybe I'll get my podcast going and we'll have to do this.
I might be busy. I might be unavailable if you try to get me and Dierdorf and you on.
Talk about you. That's all we'll do.
Talk about me? No, with Dierdorf on at the same time, guess what? You got no shot there. Dan, like Debbie Dierdorf, Dan's lovely bride.
She's great.
Yes, she is. she said something a couple years ago, whatever. He says, when Dan goes into the room, the oxygen leaves. And I thought to myself, that's exactly right. When he walks into the room, everything else stops, and it's all Deerdorf all the time.
It's great, though. It's great.
Yeah,
you guys were sitting, I think it was a road game at Maryland, or I think that's where it was, and I was just walking into the hotel bar to get something to eat, and you guys were there and invited me so nicely, and wow, I was so entertained that whole evening listening to you guys.
We can be entertaining at times.
Yes, you can. Yeah. Always.
Thank you so much. My best to your family and your mom, and good health during these tough times.
Thanks, Jim. You too. And my love to Robbie, as always.
Thank you. What great fun I had chatting with Angelique. I hope you enjoyed her experiences and personality as much as I do. Don't miss her work in the Detroit News. Whatever she writes has a human connection to it, which makes her work unique. For more conversations in Season 2 and to revisit some interesting chats from Season 1, go to thebrandyshow.com or jimbrandstatter.com. You can also search out my conversations with on your favorite podcast platform. Keep an eye on my Facebook page, Jim Brandstatter 76, and Twitter @JimBrandstatter for updates on any new episodes. Thanks for stopping by.